A telegram that was received in Washington, D.C. on January 26, 1925 reads, "Serious epidemic diphtheria at Nome necessitates rapid transportation of antitoxin from Nenana to Nome. Stop. Have you any funds to pay for relaying dog teams from Nenana to Nome? Or would you join me in assuming obligation to be met by Alaska legislator? Stop. Answer quickly. Dan Sutherland, delegate from Alaska." Hello, everyone, and welcome to Transmissible, a public health podcast. I am your host, Jessica Stahl, and I have spent most of my career as a contractor with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, first working with dangerous and rare pathogens in the laboratory, then traveling internationally with CDC to train scientists in rare bacterial identification. I then worked on the emergency COVID-19 response on the laboratory and testing task force, working on health comms and with the media. I also have my MPH from UAB with a concentration in epidemiology and a biology undergrad degree as well. And welcome to Transmissible. This is my passion project. I love jumping on here. I basically do this like big deep dive, and then I jump on here and I present to you guys, topics in public health. I tend to lean infectious diseases just because that's more my background and my public health passion. But we've also covered non-infectious disease topics like public health challenges during wartime. Let's see, morning sickness. I had really bad morning sickness from pregnancy last year, so I did a big deep dive episode about that. We've done, going into the infectious topics, we've done typhus, rabies, Zika, dengue, we've done so many. Rocky Mountain spotted fever, just the list goes on and on. I think this is episode 40. I've now been doing this for 2 years. And I took a slight break. I just want to say, I'm never gone. I think this break lasted 2 months. I can't really talk a ton about it because I was working as a consultant on a confidential project, but that contract ended end of October. It is now November 4th, so I immediately am jumping back on. This is my home base. I will always come back to it, but if for some reason I go radio silent for a month or two, just know I'm working on something fun and it's taking up kind of my extra free time that I use to do this podcast, but I will always come back. This podcast is my baby and I love it so much. We have listeners joining us from over 45 different countries. I believe we're now at every state in America as well. And I just really appreciate everyone who has been along for this journey. I like to say this podcast is 90% public health and 10% what is it like to start a podcast in your last semester of MPH school. I was procrastinating working on my thesis, and so I started a podcast. And it's just been so much fun, and I've just really missed getting on here. I'm a little rusty, I'm a little winded. It's kind of a skill set that you have to keep sharp to be able to talk essentially by yourself. I'm in a room with a microphone, but I'm talking to the computer and not also getting super out of breath while you do it. So I'm a little rusty, but this episode today, I'm so excited. I had so much fun researching this. This is probably one of my most favorite ones I've done. And I'm a little nervous. I want to do it justice. It's a great story. There's a book about this topic. I'm going to link it in the podcast bio, the episode bio. I also will have all of my citations. I had to lean heavily on citations and historical citations for this because there are just so many details, and there's actually a lot of misinformation around this story, and we'll kind of get into that towards the end, but there's a lot of different stories to this story, and so I really did an insane deep dive, and the story that I'm presenting to you, I believe to be the accurate story. So yeah, I'm really excited for this topic. And yeah, I think that's about it. That's kind of the what do you call it? What do you call it when I can't think of the term, but when you go over stuff at the beginning, there's a term. Anyways, hold on, okay, I paused recording to think about it. It's housekeeping. Those are our housekeeping topics. That's what you say when it's okay, we got to get our normal stuff out of the way that we always chit chat about before we get into the story. But I also wanted to say one thing. Even though I haven't been recording for the past month, 2 months-ish, maybe 3, it might be 3. Y'all know I love data. I call myself a data girly. I love watching the analytics. One of my favorite things about this podcast is watching the analytics in an international sense. Same reason I love global health. I love connecting with people from different countries, and I've been watching the charts, and I just want to give a special shout out to my lovely listeners from Taiwan and Singapore. Transmissible has been bopping around the charts there, and I just wanted to give a hearty hello. I'm just very grateful for all of my listeners, and this is what I was thinking. My email for this podcast is transmissiblepodcast@gmail.com. If you want, I would love it if you guys would send me like an email and a picture of where you're listening from. I thought that'd be really cool. I can make a TikTok of a compilation. I can also not. So put in like the body of the email if you do or don't want it shared on social media. Either way, I will respect it. But I would just like love to see where you guys listen to the podcast from. That would just be really fun. Selfishly, that'd be really fun to see that. So just an idea. So no pressure, but like kind of pressure. Like just send the email, transmissiblepodcast@gmail.com. And I just love to see like, where are you right now? Like take out your phone. Like where are you right now listening from? It would be really cool, don't you think, to see like everyone's view? It can be a picture of yourself, or it doesn't have to be. Like I was kind of envisioning like, what are you looking out on? Are you sitting at home? Are you on a subway? Are you sitting at work? Are you in the car? Maybe don't take the picture if you're driving, but you get the gist. I think it would be really cool to just see where everyone is listening from. So, okay, those are our housekeeping things. And so those are is that everything I wanted to cover? I think that was everything I wanted to cover. It's just been a while, but yeah, without further ado, let's just dive right in. So early 1900s, Nome, Alaska. Nome is a town located on the southern Seward Peninsula coast on the Norton Sound of the Bering Sea. So think of like the left side of Alaska. Together with the Klondike Gold Rush, which was in the late 1800s, and the Fairbanks Gold Rush, which was in the early 1900s, Nome was among one of the biggest gold rushes north of 60 degrees latitude on the North American continent. Much of the gold was lying in the beach sand and could be recovered without any need for a claim. This made it very attractive, and thousands flocked to Nome. However, by 1925, the rush is over. The town is a little bit more sleepy, has fewer people, and in that very cold winter of 1925, very sick children are dying, and there's only one doctor and 4 nurses in town. So these children, I believe all of these first children are native children, so their parents are bringing them to the doctor. He's examining them. At first, the first little kid he thinks has tonsillitis, and then unfortunately the child dies. Another kid comes in, a 7-year-old, she dies of this kind of mystery sore throat situation. A third child comes in, he's 3 years old. The doctor examines him, sees some hallmark signs, and he says, okay, this child has the infamous diphtheria. But he goes to inject the antitoxin and notices that it's expired. Their lots are expired, and he has to make a very hard call. Does he give the child expired serum, which was risky in his mind, or does he use more holistic, traditional methods? He opts, because he didn't want to give the child expired serum, to go with holistic, traditional methods. And as the days go by, the child gets sicker, and this 3-year-old ends up dying by this doctor's side. And the reality, the weight of the situation is closing in on him. He knows, okay, this is the start of a diphtheria outbreak, and they do not have the antitoxin that they need. So these kids are getting infected with the infamous diphtheria. This is a lethal respiratory disease known at the time as the strangling angel of children. Diphtheria is a toxin-mediated infection primarily caused by Corynebacterium diphtheriae. And toxin-mediated just means that an illness is caused by the toxin. Toxin is like a poison produced by this organism rather than the organism itself that is invading the body. If the bacteria make this diphtheria toxin, the resulting infection is known as diphtheria. This toxin causes this horrific damage to body tissues, and I want to kind of deep dive on this toxin really quick before we get into this crazy story. So, like a mini crash course. So, some Crinibacterium diphtheriae are toxigenic, meaning that they produce this toxin. To be toxigenic, 2 criteria must be met. First, the bacteria must be infected with a bacteriophage, which is a specific virus that infects bacteria that carries the diphtheria tox gene, or that this bacteria comes from a strain that was previously infected by this type of bacteriophage. And then second, the tox gene must be expressed or read by the bacteria so that they can synthesize the toxin. Non-toxin producing strains are those that don't have this tox gene or that have it and don't express it. And these illnesses are much more mild, are not severe, and is not called diphtheria. So that's the toxin side. How does diphtheria spread? Diphtheria is transmitted from person to person, usually by respiratory droplets, and an infected person without intervention is infectious for 2 to 3 weeks. So as you can imagine, in this small town that has a blizzard raging around it, this could spread very, very rapidly. Early symptoms of diphtheria are not remarkable. They include a sore throat, loss of appetite, low-grade fever. But as disease progresses, the most notable feature, the famous feature, may arise. And that is this thick gray substance called a pseudomembrane, and it spreads over the tonsils, the larynx, and the pharynx, which the larynx is what connects your throat to your windpipe, and then the pharynx is your throat, basically. And so as you can imagine, like tonsils, throat, this kind of like head, neck area is getting this really thick gray pseudomembrane. The pseudomembrane is formed from waste products and proteins related to the toxin secreted by this bacteria, and it sticks to tissues and starts to obstruct the breathing. The United States recorded a high of 206,000 cases of diphtheria in 1921, resulting in 15,520 deaths. This is a case fatality ratio of 7.5%. The diphtheria case fatality rates range from about 20% for those who are under the age of 5, so that's 1 in 5 kids dying if they're under the age of 5, or if they're over 40. So under 5, over 40, 20% death rate, to 5 to 10% for those who are age 5 to 40. Now, let me just put a little caveat here. These numbers are, in my opinion, not well documented on the internet. There are a lot of very trustworthy resources giving very different numbers for this. I've seen up to a case fatality ratio of 69% of those who are left untreated. I've seen 40%. This one is from the 1920s, and it's not spliced out by if they're treated or not. So it's averaging those. I've seen the modern day with treatment today, 2025, with treatment for those who are unvaccinated with Tdap vaccine, who are unvaccinated, still 1 in 10 will die with the treatment. So there's kind of a wide range, but as we can see, it is a very deadly disease. It was the 3rd leading cause of death in children in England and Wales in the 1930s. So not ideal, especially not in this small town that is basically snowed in. This was something that people were very afraid of, and the only cure or hope at that time was this serum or this antitoxin. And I want to tell you a little bit. We already discussed the toxin, so I want to discuss the cure. So Emil von Behring, who in the early 1890s became an assistant at the Institute for Infectious Diseases, and he started his studies with experiments on the development of a therapeutic serum. In 1890, together with his university friend Erich Wernicke, he had managed to develop the first effective therapeutic serum against diphtheria. At the time, together with Subzero Kitatsu, I'm sorry to him if I'm mispronouncing that, he developed an effective therapeutic serum also against tetanus. The researchers immunized rats, guinea pigs, and rabbits with attenuated forms of the infectious agent causing diphtheria and alternatively tetanus. The sera produced by these animals was then injected into non-immunized animals. that were previously infected with the virulent bacteria. The ill animals could be cured through the administration of the serum. Huge, huge breakthrough. And in 1901, when the Nobel Prizes were first awarded for the very first time, Behring received the prize in physiology or medicine. So huge deal. This is groundbreaking. And in 1913, Behring went public with his diphtheria protective agent, TA, antitoxin. It contained a mixture of diphtheria toxin and therapeutic serum antitoxin. The toxin was meant to cause a light general response to the body, but to not harm the person. In addition, it was designed to provide long-term protection. The new drug was tested at various clinics and was proven to be non-harmful and effective. That little part is an excerpt from the history of vaccines, and I have that citation in the body of the podcast. So as we can see, the serum is huge and they need it in Nome. Well, they need non-expired in Nome. So now let's go back. It's January of 1925 in the former gold rush small Alaskan town of Nome. The snow is coming down like crazy. The temps are reaching negative 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and there are gale force winds. So not ideal. They're literally in the middle of a blizzard. And Nome's only physician, Dr. Curtis Welch, is seeing these children with these classic diphtheria symptoms. And he's just like fearing the worst. He knows what's happening. Can you imagine the claustrophobia, like sinking feeling of what is in front of you? And he's just fearing the worst. The entire village has 1,400 people, but some numbers say the region had 3,000 children. So as you can imagine, there are a lot of people who are at a very high risk of this fast spreading, very deadly infectious disease. He quickly orders this quarantine, but he knows that the antitoxin or serum, kind of use them interchangeably, is the only thing that can ward off just like a mass casualty situation. So what are they going to do? They're trapped. The disease is spreading. These children are literally suffocating, and the nearest batch of serum is more than 1,000 miles away in Anchorage, Alaska. Nome's ice-choked harbor made sea transportation absolutely impossible. The airplanes that could fly in supplies had open cockpits. So you can't fly an open cockpit plane in these temperatures and with this blizzard going on, your cold face, slash death. So that's not possible. And the nearest train station is 700 miles away. So dog sledding is its best chance at survival here. However, here's the issue. The conditions outside made this nearly impossible for the mushers and their dogs. They would have just stayed home. This is not the weather to get fancy on the dog sleds with, right? But the territory's governor, Scott C. Bone, is like, no, we got to do it. So he starts rapidly recruiting the best drivers and dog teams to stage a relay race style of around the clock, this mission to transport a somewhat fragile serum from the train station in Nenana to Nome. So they're going to take the serum from Anchorage, take it to this train station, which is 700 miles away, and then they're going to have to dog sled it from Nenana to Nome in this crazy weather. So word went out for volunteers, these, specialized mushers. They call them mushers. It's like a dog sledder. It's called a musher. Via telegram and telephone, 20 drivers responded, and they were all very experienced, and some had delivered mail in that region to those small towns along this trail. So they were kind of familiar, but obviously would not have gone out in this weather. So they got the guys in line. They have a plan, and on the very cold night of January 27th, 1925, at 50 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, the serum arrived at this train station. It was packaged very, very carefully by a doctor in Anchorage. Can you imagine the pressure? And because the serum can't break. So there are these and I'll have pictures. I'm going to make a TikTok of all these pictures because the pictures are incredible. But I will also link them in the body of the podcast. But they're these serum bottles, they're vials. They could break, they could freeze. They're not supposed to freeze, but they kind of can freeze, but they really can't break. So he packs them. The pack is around 20 pounds and it's wrapped very carefully with a bunch of fur. So picture just this big fur ball with a box of serum in the middle. On this box, there's a picture of it. I'll link that too. It says, do not freeze. The Z of the freeze is like done incorrectly. And then there's another thing that just says handwritten Alaska. And then there's like a stamp that says rush. So I'm obsessed. I loved it. I love it. So the package is wrapped, the serum is ready to go, and now it just needs to be transported. So dog musher Wild Bill Shannon ties the package to his sled. He gives the signal to his 9 dogs pulling a sled, and they were off into the still, quiet night with the hopes of saving these poor children in Nome that with each passing hour were having a harder time breathing from the strangling angel of death, diphtheria, that has this crazy high case fatality ratio for children under 5. So Wild Bill Shannon is off, but he ends up having, as we can imagine, a fairly challenging night. By the time he gets to the roadhouse, a roadhouse stopping point along the path where he could rest, at 3 a.m. in the morning, he has developed frostbite on his face, and 3 of his dogs were too exhausted to continue. So those dogs stayed, and he pressed on. Also, let me backtrack a little bit. If you're not familiar with dog sleds, basically there's a person on a sled that can go over snow, and in front of it, there's a line going forward of a bunch of dogs, and there's usually a lead dog. And it's kind of before like snow machines or snowmobiles, you could go over snow. And so it's a bunch of dogs pulling a sled. There's a person on the sled who mushes the dogs, and they go mush, mush. If you've seen like old Christmas movies, I feel like there's a lot of dog sled imagery in old Christmas movies. So anyways, let's continue. So he gets to this roadhouse at 3 a.m. He has frostbite on his face. 3 of his dogs have to stay at that house, but he and the rest of the dogs, they press on. By 11 a.m., he arrives to his destination. It's a roadhouse 52 miles from where he started in the night. The serum package was then handed off to the next driver, Edgar Callans. And on the morning that Wild Bill finishes his portion of the race, a phone call tells Leonard Seppala to start getting in position for his leg of the Arctic relay. He would drive his dog sled, led by Togo the dog, more than 300 miles eastward, where he would get in position to wait for the package. He would then head back westward in both directions. He, unfortunately for him, but great for the lore, great for the story, would have to cross this very, very, very dangerous ice, which formed over the Norton Sound, which is an inlet of the Bering Sea. So he has this very daunting situation ahead of him. It's cold, it's icy, it's isolated. But what these guys didn't know is that newspaper readers all across America were just loving it. They were living for it. They were nervously waiting updates because these roadhouses along the trail that they were stopping at were sending telegrams to the media. So the front page of the Washington Evening Star featured an Associated Press dispatch describing the efforts. The article read, "Fastest and most faithful dog teams in the district were in a race against the advances of an epidemic of diphtheria raging at Nome." So the American public is living for it. They're just following this race, but these guys don't know. They're just in the middle of just a crazy blizzard situation and a race against time. So this race against time continues with the mushers and their dogs, and they are heading westward. We are now to the 4th day, January 31st, and Leonard Seppala has already crossed the dangerous ice, so he chose to go over it going east to get in position because, he's on the west side of Alaska, so he has to go east to get in position. So as he's on the trail, Seppala encounters another team of dogs ahead, and it was Henry Ivanhoff. He was the one who had the package. So he starts like waving his arms and yelling. He's like, I got the package, I got the package. So they stop, they hand off the serum, and Seppala is off, and he is now making his way back to Nome. But he had a very critical decision to make. Crossing the Norton Sound was always dangerous, but there was also a storm coming in off of the Bering Sea. That meant that the ice could break up, dooming Seppala, Togo, and the other dogs and this precious life-saving serum. It was possible to drive around the Norton Sound, but that would add a day to the journey. So does he go over the really dangerous part? It's quicker, it's more direct, but there's this blizzard coming in, the ice could break up, he could just fall right through the ice. Or does he go around it, but he's out there for another day and the children don't really have the luxury of time. So he makes a decision and he decides to pass over, heading west, the Norton Sound with this package of serum in the darkening late afternoon. And Sapala has confidence in Togo, who was leading the way. It becomes too dark for Sapala to see. So he's over the Norton Sound. It's too dark for him to see, and the wind was so loud he could not listen for any of the sound on the ice cracking. Like, can you imagine? But Togo, the lead dog, had his head down and was keeping the course straight. And at about 8 p.m., Sapala and the dogs arrived on the other side of the frozen Norton Sound. They had made it over the most dangerous part of the mission. They had covered 84 miles in one day, and the dogs were absolutely exhausted. Sapala fed the dogs seal blubber and salmon, and they all slept for a few hours. Waking up at 2 a.m., Sapala realizes that the storm is getting worse. He started off towards his next destination, Golovin, which is 50 miles away. For parts of the trail, Sapala could not see anything, so he was putting all of their fate and the lives of the children in Nome, because they had the serum, it was all in Togo, the lead dog's hands, who was faithfully leading the way. The final part of the trail required climbing up a series of steep hills where Togo led the way, relying on his intelligence and backed by this excellent care that Sapala had given him. Their diets were very strategic and nutritious, and they were optimized for endurance. By 3 p.m., Sapala and his team arrived at Golovin and passed the package of serum off to Charlie Olson. This package, they haven't opened it, so they're hoping that the vials are not broken, is now only 78 miles from Nome. Olson took off with the package, taking it 25 miles to Bluff, and now enters Gunnar Kaysen. So Gunnar Kaysen's famous. So keep in mind, Olson tells Kaysen that the conditions are horrible, the blizzard is insane, and the winds are strong enough at times to blow his sled off the trail. Not ideal. But Kaysen takes off with 2 huskies, Balto and Fox, in the lead, heading into the face of the blizzard. They had to leave the trail at times to go around these big snowdrifts. Balto, this lead dog's sense of smell, keeps them on the right path. Similarly to Togo before him, he is leading his team with exceptional intelligence and instinct. He is picking up, I was really interested in how is he doing this? So these dogs pick up the scent of other dogs which had passed weeks earlier. So they're following this under the snow beaten trail of past dogs, and they're through this blizzard and through tons of snow in the ground, they are smelling where the dogs had gone before him. So even though these mushers cannot see from this just blizzarding snow, the dog's sense of smell is keeping them on the trail. So while crossing an area called Bonanza Flat, the sled flips over by the wind, ejecting the serum package into the snow, and Kaysen has to get down on his hands and knees in this blizzard, feeling around, trying to find the package. He finds it, he secures it to a sled, and they're off again. The plan was for Kaysen to hand off the package to this very last relay musher, Ed Rohn, but Kaysen just keeps going past the roadhouse and carries on. Apparently, Ed Rohn had been resting when he arrived. Now, we don't know. Does Kaysen want to be the one who strolls into Nome? Did he kind of leave Ed hanging, or was Ed not in position, not ready? We don't really know, but keep that in mind. Then, to the relief of the medical team and the town, at 5:30 a.m. on Monday, February 2nd, 1925, Kaysen and the team arrive on Front Street in Nome. There's pictures of this. It's very cool. The life-saving serum had arrived. But was it usable? This thing had been out in just insane temperatures. It had been part of that sledding accident. It had been thrown. We don't know. It's just, it's a bunch of fragile vials wrapped in fur, in this box that's wrapped in fur. So Dr. Curtis Welsh examines this serum and he discovers that it is frozen. Now remember, on the box, it says, do not freeze. But they thought and they decided it's usable. The Anchorage-based doctor who wrapped the package had wrapped it so well that not a single vial had broken, and by 11 a.m. the serum was thawed and ready to be administered to the sickest patients in Nome. So this serum basically stops diphtheria in its tracks, And on Tuesday, February 3rd, 1925, the lead story on the front page of the New York Times was about the serum's arrival in Nome. The story tells of Gunnar Kaysen surviving the blizzard, and it does mention Leonard Seppala. Also, I was definitely saying Seppala at the beginning. Just if you're like very familiar with the story, just know that I'm not going to go back and change it, but it's Seppala, I believe, giving him credit so Seppala gets credit in this New York Times post for traveling the most vicious winter-ridden stretch. That's a quote of the journey. So Gunnar Kaysen, is the one who enters into Nome and everyone's excited, but Seppala and Togo the dog had done the worst part of the trail. That's important. So on the next day, Wednesday, February 4th, an article sharing Gunnar Kaysen's first person account is in newspapers across America. So Kaysen, he was the last part of the race. So he's in Nome. He has the infrastructure. Probably he's able to warm up a little quicker. He's a little more comfortable. He's able to get telegraphs out probably a little bit easier. And he's loving it. He is, America's hero, even though Seppala had done the hardest part of the race, and this becomes very contentious. So Kaysen is quoted as saying, "I couldn't see the trail." This is a quote. "I couldn't see the trail. Many times I couldn't even see my dogs. So blinding was the gale," the gale force winds. "I gave Balto, my lead dog, his head and trusted him. He never once faltered. It was Balto who led the way." But people still hadn't heard from Seppala and Togo, who had had the hardest terrain and the most miles. They were resting at these checkpoints and slowly making their way back to Nome. So Kaysen had this media advantage of being the first guy in Nome. The next day, February 5th, the New York Times published an editorial which began praising Balto and suggesting a monument be placed in his honor. The New Yorkers the dog lovers of New York took this very seriously. They did a campaign to commission this statue of Balto, the hero of Nome. And by the time Seppala gets to Nome with Togo and his dogs, Balto and Kaysen are already very famous across America. Seppala is outraged. He believes that the wrong dog is getting all the credit. He's like, "No, Togo, man. Togo did it." Kaysen's like, "No, but Balto." And so this becomes this huge thing. Kaysen and Balto are brought to Hollywood, where they appeared in a silent film, Balto's Race to Nome. Kaysen and Balto also went on this kind of media circuit that summer. They get this bronze statue of Balto in New York. And let me just say, Balto did great. There's no shade at Balto. It's more that Togo is being left out, and Kaysen is he's a little bit media hungry. I think we can say that. This statue is just this gold statue. It's unveiled in December of 25. And, the newsreels capture the scene. Kaysen's there. He's loving it. Balto's there. A bunch of people came. Togo gets a little bit of credit. He also made an appearance in New York City a year after the unveiling of the Balto statue. Seppala and Togo were honored between periods at a hockey game in Madison Square Garden. The New York Times noted that he was given a Hero's Gold Medal by a really famous Arctic explorer. Seppala and Togo traveled to the northeast to race in Maine in 1927. Seppala stayed in Maine for a few years, and Togo lived out the rest of his life there. Kaysen ends up selling Balto to a businessman in Cleveland, and who then donates him to the Cleveland Zoo. So Balto spends the rest of his life as a popular attraction for children in the Cleveland Zoo. On the New York statue, 3 words pay tribute to Balto, Togo, and the rest of the dogs, and it says endurance, fidelity, and intelligence. So a great story that gets a little bit drama at the end, but what happens to these sick kids in Nome? This is a public health podcast. What happens? They get this serum. They thought it's not supposed to freeze. It seems to still be good. Dr. Welsh and these 4 nurses start treating these sick patients. They start administering it, and the serum successfully halts the spread of diphtheria, preventing this epidemic, resulting in 5 official deaths and 29 cases, although the actual number may have been higher due to some of the native families not wanting Dr. Welsh to do examinations. So they could have gotten sick and then just gotten better because 100% of the children do not die of diphtheria. So base fatality rate, you will have a little bit of wishy-washiness in the number of cases because some people don't seek medical care and they just naturally get better over time. So that is the story of the Great Serum Race. This was so interesting to research. There's this book, I really want to read the book, and it's called The Cruelest Miles by Gay Salisbury and Lainey Salisbury. I have it linked in the citations. If you read it, send me an email because I think I'm going to read it. This is just such an interesting story. I would love to hear more of the first person accounts of like the actual miles on the trail and just like what they were thinking and how crazy it was. But very interesting. Also, as I'm sure a lot of you know, but the D and the Tdap vaccine that we now get covers diphtheria. We don't really hear a lot about diphtheria because it has kind of become a disease of the past. It went from being one of the number one killers of children to something that, modern day physicians, at least in the US, really have not seen in person because vaccines have totally taken it out. It is not endemic in the US, and I feel like this story is good motivation to get the Tdap because something called the strangling, what is it? Is it strangling or suffocating? Hold on. Where are my notes? Is it strangling or suffocating? Something called the strangling angel of children that, thanks to the Tdap vaccine, we just don't even hear about anymore. That's a success story right there. So that is the story. If you have questions, concerns, if I got something right, if I got something wrong, shoot me an email. And, I'm always open for corrections that I can address on the next episode. But it was very fun to get back in the seat, back in front of the microphone. I've really missed doing this. And now that my contract for that consulting gig is over, it was just a temporary couple month thing. Very cool. But the things I was signing had capital red letters at the top saying confidential. So I can't give a lot of details about it other than that it was very, very interesting, very fun. And it was in the vaccine misinformation category. And I think that's all I should say about it. But that part is not confidential because that was part of the original. Basically, yeah, it was part of the original thing that before I signed, I could read, but then after I signed the NDAs, then I could learn more about it. So that part was fine. I have not broken any rules, but, so yeah, now I'm back and I would like to get these out more often. So I have a lot in my head, in my mind that I would like to do. I was driving in the car. I was listening to a thing about sports betting and gambling. I would really like to do an epi heavy episode on sports betting, and I just have so many things. I have like a list going in my head of topics I want to cover. So stick around, give a follow, give a rate. So then if you follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I'm sure the other ones too, but those are the main ones I know, then when a new episode comes out, you will get a notification. And yeah, thanks for hanging out. This one was so fun to research and record. And just as a final reminder, this podcast is not medical advice. It does not reflect any of my employers or past schools. This is me deep diving a topic and to the best of my ability, giving what I believe to be true information. And I have a lot of citations. But remember to seek your own medical advice from your own doctor. I think we all know that, but I'm just covering myself legally. So I will see you guys next time, and thank you for listening. Bye.